to mention real quick, make sure you renew your ASCE memberships. I know those are due coming up here pretty soon. And then another thing I wanted to mention, recently, Statistic Nationals, I went and kind of did a geocaching of some of the ASCE national landmarks that are actually in our neck of the woods. And those include the 57th Street Bridge in Hamilton, Michigan, the Trenchless Culvert in Algoma, Michigan, and the 2nd Street Bridge in Allegan, Michigan. They're just cool sites with some ASCE plaques, some information, and some of them have hiking trails around. So if you're interested in finding out where these are at and going to see them, shoot me a message and I'll get you some more information. But that takes care of the housekeeping items. So I will pass it over to Haley to introduce our speakers.
Thanks, James. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. Before we get started, I just wanted to let you know that we are recording. We plan to record our meeting long and the presenter is okay with it, and then we plan to put them on our YouTube channel, so this will be available for future viewing. So our presenter today is Aaron Reed. He is from SME, and he's going to be presenting on Trenchless Drilling Lessons Learned, Failures in Geotechnical Prevention. So Aaron, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Haley. Okay, so hello and welcome to this month's ASCE Western Michigan branch's presentation on trenchless drilling. Today we are going to focus on issues that we as SME have observed and encountered prior to and during construction for various trenchless drilling projects, and how a geotechnical evaluation can help identify those issues to reduce overall risk. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Aaron Reed, as Haley said, and I'm a project engineer within SME's geotechnical group in our Kalamazoo office. I have worked at SME since I graduated from Western Michigan University in 2011. I am a past president of the ASCE Southwest Michigan branch and am also a member of the North American Society of Trenchless Technology, or NASTT. I'm married to my wife, Katrina Reed, and together we have a 2-year-old boy named Jackson. Right now, we're in the midst of potty training, so if anyone would like to make next month's presentation on the training or mysteries of potty training, I know I would be one of the first to sign up, along with a few other people I work with in our Kalamazoo office with young kids. So for those of you who haven't worked with SME before, we're a multidisciplinary engineering firm with offices in Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. And the easiest way I like to describe SME is, we're a group of people with a wide variety of engineering and construction backgrounds. And, there aren't too many problems we can't solve as a group if you give us the opportunity. One thing I do want to highlight for those of you who do work on projects in the northern Indiana area is that we did just open an office in Fort Wayne. So if you do have a project down there, let us know and hopefully we can help you out. So before we get into some of the case studies that I want to talk about in the second half of this presentation, I wanted to take the time to go over how I got my introduction into trenchless utility installation, and specifically how that relates to how MDOT trenchless utility installation permitting requirements have changed over the years. So the Enbridge 6B pipeline is an underground oil pipeline that runs across the entire lower half of the state of Michigan. As most of you are probably aware, 6B broke in July of 2010 near Marshall, Michigan, creating one of the largest inland oil spills in the continental United States. So as a result of that spill, the decision to replace 6B with a new pipeline was made. And as you can imagine, this replacement pipeline crossed multiple county and state roadways, and the primary method of installation chosen by the contractor at these crossings was to use trenchless installation methods. This consisted mostly of horizontal auger bores, or more commonly referred to as jack and bores. So the replacement project got rolling, and in September in 2013, SME was notified of an observed settlement within the pavement of US 131, which is just south of Schoolcraft at the new 6B crossing location. So after the cause of the settlement was found to be the jack and bore pipe installation of the new 6B pipeline, MDOT put a hold on all upcoming trenchless crossings below MDOT roadways that were a part of this project. So in order for the contractor to proceed with the remaining crossings, MDOT required that a feasibility study, which included soil borings, be performed at each of these various crossing locations. They also required that full-time inspection for each crossing be performed. So inspection included documentation of the contractor's means and methods, as well as monitoring of the roadway for movement prior to, during, and after each crossing was completed. So from September 2013 to about August 2014, SME observed over 15 trenchless pipeline installations as part of the 6B replacement project. To fulfill MDOT's requirements that they laid out, I performed multiple feasibility studies, and for almost 6 months during that time frame, followed multiple pipeline crews across the state to ensure that further damage did not occur to MDOT's roadways. So I would say this is probably where I got some of the best training when it relates to at least horizontal auger bore installations and just cross-country pipeline type installation projects in general. I just want to emphasize, I really think that you can learn a lot by following a pipeline crew across the state. And I would encourage, if you have the opportunity to see one of these trenchless installations, go out and see it. You can learn a lot from the contractor, and it puts a lot of things in perspective if you have those opportunities. So as a result of the 6B replacement project, it started to make MDOT rethink some of the permitting requirements for future trenchless installation projects. MDOT recognized that there was a need to have some sort of geotechnical requirements for these types of projects going forward. In July of 2015, MDOT released a 2-page guidance document describing the geotechnical requirements for all trenchless installation permit applications going forward. There were some initial growing pains with this document. It was initially distributed by email as a Word document. Not all excuse me, local TSCs were aware of some of the requirements that were outlined. In 2017, the document went through a revision, and there were some issues with getting this updated document distributed. However, despite some of these early adoption issues, what it essentially did was provide a base set of requirements for contractors and to designers to follow, and it really started to get people to think about or to think beyond the benefits that a trenchless installation can provide, and started to also get them to think about whether or not it is actually feasible for that given project or that given site and the constraints associated with it. So jumping forward in time to January of 2019, we get the bones of the 2015 and 2017 geotechnical requirements document put into what's called MDOT Form 3702, which is titled Application Requirements for Trenchless Installations. So Form 3702 is publicly available on MDOT's website and provides not only geotechnical requirements, but also plan and design requirements that must be provided as part of the permitting application process to do these crossings below MDOT roadways. So to MDOT's credit, this type of document is somewhat unique to this geographical area. The Indiana Department of Transportation outlines certain requirements within their 2020 standard specification manuals for trenchless utility installations that somewhat infer similar requirements that are outlined in Form 3702. I'm not aware of any design or feasibility study requirements for the Ohio Department of Transportation. In addition, I haven't come across or I'm not aware of any similar requirements existing at the county or city level within the state of Michigan. So this document is somewhat, like I said, unique in that it kind of spells out to designers and contractors what the expectations are when you are performing a trenchless project beneath an MDOT roadway. So one thing I do want to highlight from Form 3702 is that it references special conditions for each trenchless drilling method that is recognized by MDOT. So each of these special conditions, list certain requirements for each method. So what I'd like to do today briefly is show you how to access these forms in addition to Form 3702 on MDOT's website. So if you open up your internet browser and we're just to Google search MDOT form search, the first hit is going to be the one that's going to take you directly to the link you want to go to. So this essentially is MDOT's platform for storing all of their various forms and special conditions. So for example, if you wanted to find 3702, it's fairly easy. You can just simply type it into the form number box and up it pops. So if you want to look up this document on your own, it's pretty easy to find. The other thing that's nice is they do allow you to search by title or keyword. So for example, if you wanted to look up the special condition for an HDD or horizontal directional drilling project, you can easily type that in and up pops the special condition, or 3703A. So all the special conditions for the different trenchless drilling methods are some form of 3703. So you could simply type in 3703 as well, and you're going to get all the special conditions for each of those recognized methods. Another good form to review if you want to learn more about some of these different trenchless drilling methods, which I'm not going to get too much into today, is if you were to simply type in trenchless, there's a document or form number called 3701, which gives a general overview of each of the various trenchless drilling methods and kind of the pros and cons and limitations of each. So it's a good starting point if you don't have a lot of familiarity with some of these methods, and can kind of get you along the path of, is this something that's feasible for my project, and what are some of the constraints or range of applications that exist. So yeah, it's a good place to find that information, and like I said, it's pretty easy once you start to learn the form numbers. So why do we have these requirements? The case studies we're going to highlight today are going to emphasize the importance of a geotechnical study being performed as part of the design process for each of these various types of trenchless utility installations. The first project I'd like to highlight is an HDD gas pipeline crossing below M59 in Macomb County. So this was a 24-inch diameter high pressure gas pipeline that was installed using HDD methods consisting of a 36-inch diameter bore. So it's a fairly large pipe, fairly large bore operation. Some of the challenges associated with this HDD installation were there were 3 active roadways that were being crossed. We had many existing utilities that existed within the road right-of-way, and we also had very soft clays over clay hardpan. So one thing that you may not think about when designing an HDD bore such as this is the possibility of old geotechnical borings being performed as part of all the existing development in the area, and what these boreholes can represent to an HDD alignment. So what they are is a potential source for inadvertent drilling fluid return. So during drilling operations, there were multiple instances of inadvertent fluid return. We had one spot that happened within the median of M59. We also had another location that occurred within the parking lot of an adjacent business. So one thing that MDOT requires, and it's something that we do for all borings performed as part of an evaluation of a trenchless utility installation, is that we grout the boreholes upon completion. So the reason we do this is to prevent what you can see in these pictures from happening. A borehole is going to be a spot that isn't probably as compact or dense as the surrounding soils, and it's just going to create an opportunity for some of those drilling fluids to reach the surface. So you can't always account for every possible route that a drilling fluid could take during HDD boring operations, but there are some precautions that you can take for a project such as this. Be aware of the type of area that you are performing the project in. Is it an urban area or a developed area with greater potential of encountering possible sources for inadvertent drilling mud return? Consider using downhole pressure monitoring so that your drill pressures can be more closely monitored. And also, sometimes you're going to have to be prepared for having to perform cleanup operations if something were like this to happen. So, these are all different things that could have been considered for this project. So the second project I want to highlight is what I like to call a potential failure, because I believe our evaluation performed pre-design actually prevented a failure from occurring during construction. So DILLON drain is a county drain. It's in Eaton County. Is being considered for replacement at the shown location. The blue line is the existing drain alignment, and it was basically being replaced due to deterioration. It just had reached its lifespan. So the project involves the construction of a new drain alignment underneath Hayden Road, which runs east and west, and also a CN, Canadian National owned railroad line. So SME in this case was hired to assist with determining the feasibility of installing the proposed drain trenchlessly. CN Railroad would not allow the drain to be replaced using open cut methods, since this specific set of tracks could be used by as many as 22 freight and 2 passenger trains a day. So it's a fairly busy section of railroad. So the main constraint that we basically had on this project is that the existing tracks had to remain open or have to remain open during construction. So a trenchless installation in this case was given the first priority as a way to install this new drain alignment. So oftentimes when we're asked to perform borings next to an existing railroad, there's a desire to keep those borings outside of the limits of the railroad right-of-way, which you can see in this picture represented by the orange area. And this is for a variety of reasons. You're going to have to obtain a permit from the railroad, which can take anywhere from a month to, in some cases, a year. There are special requirements or insurance requirements. There's specific badging and safety training that often needs to be completed for field personnel working at the site. You're required to hire flagmen to direct train traffic as you are doing the work, and you have to pay for special utility locates within the right-of-way itself. So in total, these additional requirements can often add significant cost to perform the borings, depending on how many days of field exploration are required and how easy to work with that specific owner or railroad. In this case, it was Canadian National, CN, is willing to work with you. So on this specific project, the project team, including the design engineer and the owner, recognize the importance of getting geotechnical information as close to the existing tracks as possible. And part of the reason why we obtain geotechnical information for these projects is also to try and reduce the risk of damaging the overlying infrastructure during construction. As you can imagine, damage to a railroad track that sees upwards of 24 trains a day would be pretty costly. So we decided to put a boring right within the alignment of the proposed drain and within the railroad right-of-way, as you can see in the drawing. So we end up doing the boring right next to the tracks, and we find some fairly interesting conditions. So right within the proposed bore zone for the new drain, we encountered a 3-foot layer of wood that we believe to be an old layer of corduroy that was placed either during the construction of the railroad or even possibly the roadway itself, at that existing drain location. So this is pretty much a deal breaker for any sort of trenchless installation without putting the overlying tracks at a significant risk of settlement or potential failure. So had this not been identified prior to construction, or had we performed that boring, outside of the railroad right-of-way, it's very likely that we wouldn't have caught this condition during our evaluation, and would have put the tracks at significant risk to damage when the contractor went to put in this drain using a trenchless drilling method. So this is why it's very important, we get borings performed near critical pieces of infrastructure, so conditions such as this can be identified during that design process. The third project I'd like to discuss is about a horizontal auger bore below M50. So this is a project where SME was actually called to take a look at a trenchless drilling failure after it had already occurred. What's somewhat interesting about the timing of this failure along M50 is that it occurred about 10 days prior to the fall NASCAR race at Michigan International Speedway, MIS, and M50 is one of the primary routes into that speedway. So you can imagine MDOT was pretty anxious to get this road open and back up to capacity prior to the race weekend. So what happened is this failure showed up as settlement within the pavement and gravel shoulder, very similar to the US 131 failure I mentioned at the top of this presentation. The settlement occurred in one of the travel lanes and the adjacent gravel shoulder. So as you can see in the picture, there's a pretty significant dip you see in the paved shoulder and also the gravel itself. So we got on site, and after speaking with the jack and bore contractor, it was reported that clay soil conditions during drilling switched to a wet sand condition when the bore pipe had reached the edge of the roadway or pavement surface. So as soon as that bore pipe reached the wet sands, they immediately ran down the bore pipe, causing that observed settlement that's seen in the picture. So wet sands are going to typically result in some sort of settlement at the surface during a jack and bore, just because there's very little that a contractor can do to try and prevent them from running down the pipe. What was also interesting about this project is that there was actually two borings and a geotechnical evaluation performed prior to construction. So what's shown in this picture is the two borings were performed at these shown locations, and they showed very favorable conditions, mostly consisting of pretty much entirely clay. However, based on what the contractor had told us, these clay conditions were not consistent throughout the length of the bore. So we've got some discrepancy here that's happening, you know, beneath the roadway. So what's going on? What you couldn't tell from that aerial image is that M50 is actually elevated fairly significantly from the surrounding ground surface. So what we think happened is that when M50 was originally constructed, sand fill was used to create the existing roadway embankment, essentially creating a bathtub effect for perched groundwater to collect below the roadway surface. So had these borings been performed up at the roadway surface elevation, you know, this condition of perched groundwater could have been identified, and countermeasures such as dewatering or even possibly changing the drilling method could have been implemented. So it's just another example of, you know, why we do borings up at the roadway. You know, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. We're going to have to get traffic control. There's going to be some extra cost associated there, but these are the types of conditions that we're trying to find that you're not necessarily going to get if you perform these borings in the locations that they had for this evaluation. So believe it or not, the next issue is also another trenchless drilling project along M50, this time near Tompkins, Michigan. So SMU was on site for this one to observe a horizontal auger bore installation below M50. During boring operations, SME identified surface cracking within the gravel shoulder of the roadway, as you can see in this picture. And so what the contractor elected to do in this case was actually perform a confined space entry and send a laborer down the pipe to identify possible causes of why we're essentially observing ground heave at the ground surface. And what they found were two large boulders stuck at the edge of the bore pipe. Both of these boulders were too large to go inside the bore pipe, and as a result, we're essentially being pushed upwards, causing the observed cracking at the ground surface. So luckily in this case, the bore pipe was far enough away from the edge of the pavement that the contractor was able to excavate these boulders without having to damage the actual pavement surface. But what I want to emphasize on this case study is that by monitoring during construction, you know, we were able to spot this issue in real time, thereby stopping the issue progressing to the point where the pavement surface would have been damaged, or they would have had to actually remove pavement to take care of this obstruction. Okay, so the last project I'd like to briefly discuss is one that we actually recently performed a geotechnical evaluation for. It was a pretty straightforward HDD gas pipeline installation project. The field work was going really well, and then I get a call one afternoon from our drillers, and he sends me a text message with the following video, which I will play. So if you can't tell, hopefully you can see the video, but if you can't tell, it's a video of the augers, our drill augers, basically sitting about 4 feet above the ground surface, and groundwater is just pouring out the top of them. So the soil conditions along this proposed HDD alignment had generally consisted of clay, starting at the ground surface and extending all the way to the termination depth of the borings up to this point. However, at this location, we had a layer of sand that was actually encountered at a depth of about 30 feet. And within this sand layer was a confined aquifer that basically, once we penetrated it, it immediately brought groundwater up and above the ground surface elevation, as you saw in the video. So had this condition been encountered during HDD boring operations, it likely would have terminated the bore, potentially even flooded the work zone, and the contractor would have had to try to find a way to plug the hole. Perched or confined aquifers such as this are just a nightmare for HDD contractors, because it's essentially going to water down their drilling fluid mix, and it just makes it extremely difficult for them to try and finish the actual bore itself. So the simple solution here for this project was to simply just raise the alignment up and avoid this sand layer and confined aquifer condition. So that wraps up my presentation. Before we open up to questions, I did want to mention NASTT, or the North American Society of Trenchless Technology. If you are interested in learning more about various trenchless installation methods, they have a bunch of published books about each one that are fairly helpful. They do offer various courses throughout the year that you can sign up for each of these different methods to kind of give an overview of them. They do have an annual conference called the No Dig Show. Pretty clever. This year's conference was canceled due to COVID, but they do still have next year's conference scheduled for March 28th through April 1st. It's in Orlando, Florida. It's a really good conference. I went to it 2 years ago when it was in Chicago for the first time. They present a lot of really good information. It's basically a lot of case studies, but there's also some design aspects that get presented through all these different presentations that are happening throughout the day, depending on which essentially trenchless technology you want to focus on. So I highly recommend it if you want to learn more about trenchless drilling and all the different technologies that are out there. So with that, if there are any questions, please feel free to ask them.
I have a question for you, Aaron. On the project where they encountered the corduroy wood underneath the rail, how is that something that they could navigate around? I mean, what was the plan to manage that?
So this project is actually, we drilled this, let's see, in May of 2019. We're still in design, trying to figure out what exactly we're going to do. The plan right now is, let's see, it's probably the best picture, is actually we're going to try and rehab the existing drain line. It's a drain, it's a concrete drain. We're going to try and rehab the inside of that at the portion that is within the influence of the tracks. So basically that this joint that's right here is where we're going to cut it, and then we're going to install a temporary earth retention system around this corner so that we're still supporting the tracks, but can replace this using open cut methods going to the north. So yeah, it's not the issue with this drain, like I said, is not a capacity issue. It's plenty big enough for what they need. It's just, it's old. It's very deteriorated at this point. So we're going to be able to rehab that existing section and then replace the remaining. That's the plan.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions for Aaron?
Here is my contact information on this last slide. If anyone does have any questions that they'd like to ask me offline, feel free to do that. My cell phone number and email are there. So yeah, give me a call.
All right. Well, I'm not seeing anyone else with any other questions, but as Aaron said, feel free to reach out to him if you do have any as you think about this. We appreciate you, Aaron, doing the presentation today. And like I said, this is going to be recorded. This was recorded, so it'll be on our YouTube channel. So look out for a link for that coming. And we will see you all next month. Have a great rest of the week.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Aaron. It was a great presentation.
Thanks, James.
Yep,
Bye,
thank you.
everyone.